Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. The Afghan Grand Assembly, known as the Loya Jirga, has approved the release of the remaining 400 Taliban prisoners under the Doha peace deal. A resolution passed by the Jirga said the step has been taken to remove an obstacle in the start of the peace process and an end of bloodshed. President Ashraf Ghani convened the Jirga in Kabul on Friday to decide the fate of these prisoners. Meanwhile, 7 policemen have been killed and 15 others wounded in a car bomb explosion in the central city of Ghazni. Brazil has become the second country after the United States to cross 100,000 coronavirus deaths with nearly 3 million infections. India has registered the highest single-day surge in COVID-19 cases with over 65,000 new infections. India's coronavirus caseload has jumped to over 2.1 million, with more than 43,000 deaths. In Pakistan, 8 more people have lost their lives as the infection rate continues to decline, with 634 contracting the virus overnight. Globally, the COVID-19 has taken over 726,000 lives, while infecting 19.5 million. News in detail coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. We start our news bulletin from Afghanistan, where the Grand Assembly, known as the Loya Jirga, has approved the release of the remaining 400 Taliban prisoners under the Doha peace deal. A resolution passed by the Jirga say the step has been taken to remove an obstacle in the start of the peace process and an end to the bloodshed. It called on the Taliban to fulfill their part of the deal to free all government prisoners immediately. The Jirga said intra-Afghan negotiations must be initiated without any excuse after the release of the prisoners. It asked for assurance that the released Taliban will not return to the front lines and that their activities are monitored. The Assembly called on the international community, especially the US, to live up to its commitments to the people of Afghanistan. President Ashraf Ghani convened the Jirga in Kabul on Friday to decide the fate of these prisoners. Earlier, 7 policemen have been killed and 15 others wounded in a car bomb explosion in Afghanistan's city of Ghazni. A spokesperson for the Interior Ministry says the attack targeted a unit of the Public Protection Forces. It said the explosion was followed by an attempt to storm the compound in the Kotel-e-Rauza area, but all attackers were killed before entering the compound. Police say the wounded have been taken to Kabul by helicopter for treatment and 3 of them are in a critical condition. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. Moving on, Brazil has become the second country after the United States to cross 100,000 COVID-19 deaths with nearly 3 million infections. The country's coronavirus caseload has crossed 2.1 million with more than 43,000 deaths. Globally, the COVID-19 pandemic has taken over 726,000 lives with more than 19.5 million infections. More details in this report.
The new coronavirus is tumbling records, overwhelming healthcare systems, and rolling back hopes of economic revival in the Americas. US President Donald Trump's desperate push to open the economy has hit a wall with the devastating second wave ripping through the country. Trump has signed executive orders to provide more relief to Americans after failing to reach a deal with Congress.
In the current negotiations, we have repeatedly stated our willingness to immediately sign legislation providing expanded unemployment benefits, protecting Americans from eviction, and providing additional relief payments to families Democrats have refused these offers.
The situation in Chile, too, is now getting out of hand.
Today, we have arrived at 10,000 deaths. From our hearts, we feel for their families, for those who miss and love those who have gone. And even though they have gone, they will of course be remembered. We regret that this pandemic has caused us to lose so many loved ones.
Germany is witnessing a worrying resurgence in cases as rallies against mandatory mask wearing add to Berlin's problems. Over in Asia, cases in South Korea and China refuse to go away as local clusters continue to pop up. Australia is struggling to keep its economy afloat as the most populous state of Victoria reported its deadliest day despite a stringent lockdown. But there is some good news coming out of New Zealand, where the country has marked 100 days without a domestic transmission of the virus.
Moreover, India has reported a record spike in COVID-19 cases as over 65,000 tested positive for the virus overnight. The country's caseload has doubled over the past 3 weeks, taking the toll to over 2.1 million infections. The Health Ministry says 861 more people have lost their lives to the virus, increasing the tally to over 43,000. Meanwhile, in Andhra Pradesh, 10 patients have been burned to death after a fire engulfed a makeshift coronavirus treatment center at a hotel. Officials said around 40 people were present in the center, of which 20 have been rescued. Making matters worse, tens of thousands of female health workers have gone on strike to demand better pay and protection. Opposition Congress leader Rahul Gandhi says female workers have been facing attacks and harassment. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the COVID-19 death rate has dropped below two-digit figures as 8 died in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says 634 cases were reported overnight as the tally crossed the 284,000 mark. The ministry said over 260,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. It said there are over 17,000 active cases in the country, among which 791 remain critical. Sindh remains the worst hit province with over 123,000 infections, while Punjab has reported more than 94,000 cases. Now, Palestine says it has taken the issue of Israel's field executions against the Palestinians to the International Criminal Court. Secretary General of Palestine Liberation Organization Saeb Erekat said Tel Aviv's war crimes have reached unprecedented levels. Erekat said the international community should take notice of the field executions of the Palestinian citizens on a daily basis. This comes after a 23-year-old Palestinian woman, Dalia Samoudi, was martyred inside her home in the West Bank earlier on Friday. Palestine's health ministry said Israeli army shot Samoudi, a mother of 2, during its raid on the northern West Bank city of Jenin. The Israel's army has denied using live fire, but Palestine's foreign ministry says Tel Aviv is directly responsible for Samoudi's murder. Meanwhile, thousands of Israelis continue to rally outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence and demand his immediate resignation. While Netanyahu denies any wrongdoing, anger is mounting over corruption allegations and his handling of the coronavirus crisis. Waving national flags, the demonstrators called on the Prime Minister to resign. Demonstrators projected "Your time is up" in giant letters onto a building at the protest site. Local media said some 5,000 people had gathered with a large contingent of police deployed at the scene. Protesters rejected what they call Netanyahu's extreme right-wing politics, fear-mongering and politics of division.
Fighting for the future. Really, we want a different future, a future that we can live equally together without hate. And I think this is the reason you don't hear just one voice here, so many voices, because we said enough.
Now in Lebanon, Prime Minister Hassan Diab has called for early parliamentary polls, saying it's the only way out of the country's crisis. Earlier, a policeman was killed and over 100 people wounded during protests against the government's handling of this week's deadly explosion in Beirut. More than 60 people are still missing 4 days after the blast at the city's port left more than 150 people dead and another 6,000 wounded.
Thousands of people poured into Beirut's main square, demanding justice for the victims of the deadly explosion. Security officials say angry protesters tried to break through a barrier to get to the parliament building. Some threw stones on security forces, who fired tear gas in response. Lebanese authorities have arrested 16 people as part of the investigation into the incident. President Macron says the probe is looking into possible external interference in addition to simple negligence or an accident. Meanwhile, Arab League chief Ahmed Abul Ghaid said the bloc is ready to assist the investigation into the blast. France has announced to host a donor conference for Lebanon via video link on Sunday.
Now, French President Emmanuel Macron is hosting a UN-backed virtual conference to drum up aid for Lebanon after the Beirut port blast. US President Donald Trump and other UN representatives will be present at the online event. It's aimed at mobilizing funding from Europe, the US and regional states. Pledges at the virtual conference will begin at 1200 GMT. Macron said a transparent governance mechanism will be developed so all aid is directly channeled to the people. President Macron is the first world leader to visit Beirut after the blast. Moving on, Hong Kong's chief executive, Kerry Lam, says she will cancel her US visa over Washington sanctions. The US imposed sanctions on 11 Hong Kong officials, including Kerry Lam and Hong Kong liaison director Liu Huining. In a social media post, Lam said she does not want to visit the United States despite her visa being valid until 2026. She questioned if Washington violated the human rights of Chinese officials by revealing their personal information on the internet. Earlier, some personal data of some Chinese officials was leaked onto the internet, including passport numbers, addresses, and ID card numbers. Meanwhile, in the United States, police have arrested 24 protesters in Portland during the Black Lives Matter demonstrations. Police say an Oregon state trooper suffered a head injury in the clashes as protesters threw rocks, eggs, and fireworks. The police had declared assembly at the Penumbra Kelly unlawful and used munitions to clear the protesters who refused to disperse. The clashes come after a week of relative calm in the aftermath of the agreements between the state and federal officials. The protesters have been gathering in Portland against racial injustice and police brutality for 70 days in a row since George Floyd's custodial murder. Welcome back. Now, moving on with the news stories. Russia says the UK is becoming increasingly reliant on US policy despite leaving the European Union to regain its independence. In an interview, Russian ambassador to the United Kingdom, Andrei Kalin, said Washington dictates elements of London's policy making. Kalin said London is forced to submit to some of Washington's whims to negotiate a better trade deal with the United States. He said before the Brexit, the UK was guided by the European Union's policy principles. The Russian envoy said it was up to London to make a stay with or without the EU. He said Brexit presents an opportunity to boost Russia-UK economic ties, but there are some pre-existing political barriers. Now, Belarusians are voting to elect a new president today amid growing dissent and protest against the reigning government. President Alexander Lukashenko is facing off against a former teacher, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Lukashenko has been in power for 26 years and is seeking a sixth term in the office. Mass demonstrations headed by Tikhanovskaya against the government have intensified in recent weeks. Authorities have arrested a key opposition leader ahead of the polls on allegations of inciting protest. Human rights groups says more than 1,300 people have been arrested and jailed in a government crackdown during the campaign. Now, a fire at a high-rise apartment block in the Czech Republic has killed 11 people, including 3 children, in the city of Bohumín. Police say detained a suspect after fire was started deliberately. Firefighters say the fire broke out in an apartment on the 11th floor, killing 6 people. Interior Minister Jan Hamasek said the other 5 died in trying to jump out of the building. Officials say one firefighter has also been seriously injured in fighting the blaze. In Pakistan, the death toll in the rain-related incidents has risen to 23. Health officials say 8 more people lost their lives in the port city of Karachi, increasing the local count to 17. The Pakistan Met Department said up to 46 millimeters of rain was recorded in some parts of the city. Karachi experienced intermittent showers for a continuous 3 days, causing 400 electric feeders to trip, which is resulting in electricity outage. Meanwhile, flash flooding in Balochistan province has killed 6 people, including 2 children. The death toll from heavy rain, floods and landslides in South Korea has risen to 30. Central Disaster and Safety Headquarters says the number may rise as 12 people remain missing, while about 6,000 people have been displaced. Officials say about 93 square kilometers of farmland was flooded. More heavy rains are expected in the southern part of the country due to the approaching typhoon Jangmai, the season's 5th tropical storm. The flooding and rain have resulted in blockage of railway tracks, flights, cancellations and 11 slides across the country. South Korea has endured 44 consecutive days of rain in what is the country's longest monsoon since 2013. Meanwhile, Mauritius has declared a state of environmental emergency after a vessel offshore began leaking oil into the ocean. Japanese carrier MV Wakashio ran aground on a coral reef of the Indian Ocean on July 25th and its crew was evacuated. The Mauritian government said fuel was leaking from a crack in the bulk vessel's hull. Prime Minister Pravind Kumar has pleaded for international help, saying Mauritius does not have the expertise to refloat stranded ships. In a statement, the French embassy in Mauritius said a military aircraft will bring pollution control equipment to the island nation. The ship's owner, Nagasaki Shipping, said oil prevention measures are in place and an oil boom has been deployed around the vessel. Now, in the U.S., thousands of motorcycle enthusiasts are descending on Sturgis, South Dakota for a 10-day rally. Roughly 100,000 people are expected, prompting concerns the popular event could touch off a fresh wave of COVID-19 infections. Tattoos, beards and bandanas are ruling the streets of Sturgis as the roadies gather to show off. Organizers say they expect the crowd to be smaller than a normal year, when nearly 500,000 people attend. South Dakota's Republican Governor Kristi Noem has endorsed the rally after taking a largely hands-off approach towards the pandemic. Daily virus cases have been rising in South Dakota, but the 7-day average is still only about 84, with fewer than 2 deaths per day. Nagasaki is marking the 75th anniversary of the atomic bombing that devastated the city at the end of World War II. More details in this report.
On this day in 1945, the US dropped its Fat Man bomb on the Japanese city, killing at least 74,000 people. The nuclear radiation released by the bombs caused thousands of more people to die from sickness. Terumi Tanaka was a 13-year-old junior high student reading a book at his home when he heard a large sound, then everything went white.
In the burnt ruins, there were shapes that resembled human beings or bodies that had crumbled into bones everywhere. Rescuers had not arrived after 3 days, so those who could not move due to serious injuries or severe burns and had not received help were hunched or lying on the ground.
Today, the city held a scaled-back ceremony with an attendance of about 500, a tenth of the usual gathering. Attending the ceremony, Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tokyo will continue to uphold the non-nuclear principles.
While continuing to uphold the 3 non-nuclear principles, Japan will work as a bridge between nations who have different positions. By persistently urging dialogues and actions between countries, we will take initiatives on the international society's commitment to achieve a world without nuclear weapons.
Led the tribute to the survivors of the bombing, referred to as Hibashoka in Japan. The mayor urged the Japanese government to ratify the 2017 nuclear ban treaty as soon as possible.
Now, a Japanese consortium has opened an aquarium in Taiwan, their first outside Japan. This comes even as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to rage across much of the world. More details in this report.
From lunch with the penguins to the translucent shimmer of jellyfish and gliding rays, all underwater life is on display at a new aquarium in Taiwan. The aquarium in Taiwan region boasts a collection of 30,000 fish drawn from more than 300 species in 13 exhibition areas.
We plan to open at the end of 2019. As we all know, at the end of 2019, the pandemic broke out. Because of the pandemic, we had talked to multiple sides, including the government and public health authorities, and we decided to postpone the opening.
Visitors are given temperature checks on arrival as part of preventive measures due to COVID-19.
Actually, when we entered, we had masks on and they took our body temperatures, so I'm not that worried.
The complex is expected to draw 1.6 million visitors in the first year and earn annual revenue of about $30 million.
A transparent restaurant in Turkey has taken a unique approach to keep diners safe amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Customers say there is no place like a dome as a restaurant in Istanbul as they enjoy their food along with beautiful scenery. More about food in dome in this report.
Overlooking the Golden Horn on the Bosporus Strait, the restaurant has set up social distancing tents made of polycarbonate. In such an enclosed space, each dome has a special window that can be opened to circulate air. Waiters are prohibited from entering the domes unless the diners press the button installed on their tables. Kevdet Ase, owner of the restaurant, says the concept is highly popular with customers.
Sensitive to isolation and corona-related issues. They really appreciate these, and we're fully booked for many days.
So far, the restaurant only accepts bookings from regular customers to make everyone feel at ease.
We are celebrating our annual year. Here we chose this place because we need social distancing.
We felt that we will be isolated, so that's why like we are eating at home, you know, just me and my husband.
A nice view, side view.
Turkish tourism revenues hit a record $34.5 billion in 2019, jumping 17% compared to 2018. Authorities are determined to maintain COVID-19 measures as the country's daily death toll has remained below 20 since July 16th.
Now, stocks in the Gulf region are trading mixed as investors tread carefully amid countries scaling back reopening of their economies. Dubai's stock market is trading lower, hurt mostly by losses at financial and property shares. Saudi Arabia's benchmark index edged up, with Saudi Aramco gaining despite reporting a fall in second quarter profit. Dubai's main share index lost over 0.5%, driven down by a 1.5% drop in Emirates NBD Bank. Blue chip developer Emaar Properties also fell over 1%. In Abu Dhabi, the index gained fractionally, helped by marginal rise in the country's largest lender, First Abu Dhabi Bank. The Qatari index slipped marginally, with Qatar National Bank falling close to 1% and Qatar Insurance Company tumbling nearly 2%. In football, Barcelona beat Napoli by 3-1 at the Camp Nou as they sailed through 4-2 on aggregate to qualify for the Champions League quarter-finals. After a shaky start, the Catalans took the lead through a Clement Lenglet header before Messi hit a superb second in the 23rd minute. Luis Suarez converted a spot kick for Barca's third, and Lorenzo's Insigne converted a spot kick of his own at the end of the first half for Napoli. Elsewhere in Germany, Bayern Munich cruised past Chelsea by 4-1 at the Allianz Arena to qualify for the last 8 with a 7-1 aggregate victory. Polish striker Robert Lewandowski struck twice and set up 2 more goals as Bayern remained on course for a treble of titles. Ivan Perisic and Corentin Tolisso also got onto the scoresheet. The Bavarians will meet the Catalans in next week's one-off quarter-final at the Final 8 tournament in Lisbon. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.news. Take care.